Hey, how's it going, everyone? Justin again. As always, thanks for watching my channel. Welcome back. Cheers to those of you that have your beers. I hope you're enjoying your work week so far. Happy Monday. Today's discussion topic is going to be, should you do side work? And if you're going to do side work, when and how is it appropriate? Let's talk about it a little bit. So I know a lot of you guys out there, there's got to be a lot of you guys out there, you start getting a good feel for wrenching and maybe even diagnosing, and you start getting friends, family, people like that really, they start hitting you up all the time, wanting you to look at their car, check something out, things like that. And it can be very encouraging to you because you're like, hey, I might be able to make a couple bucks or whatever. You know, family and friends, depends on who it is. You maybe, charge them enough to, I don't know, buy some beer, cigarettes, whatever. Maybe you charge them a little bit more. Maybe you really don't want to do the job, so you go over and above and beyond of how much it would actually cost if they just took it to a regular shop. Just depends on how you feel at that moment. Believe me, I've been there, I've done it, and I'll explain it. So, when I was at Sears Auto Center, I had some side work that was coming up quite a bit, especially with me being in community college. The thing that I had going for me at the time was I had two brothers that had been doing it for over 30 years. So I had the experience, but not from myself, but from the two guys that I constantly worked with and pulled my side hustle on in. So I'd talk to so-and-so or somebody and they'd be like, hey, do you do this, do that? I'm like, yeah, we do everything, whatever. Welding, this, that, and the other, we can get it done, it's whatever, and this is how much. And I could pull them in, left and right, and we would just pull them in. And we would knock it out, we'd make some cash, fix the problem, and send it. So this went on for a while, almost the entire 2 years that I was at community college. And it didn't interfere with my work at Sears Auto Center because they didn't really do a whole hell of a lot there. It was mostly like, oil changes, flush jobs, brakes, alignments, things like that. There might be the occasional small repair, but they really tried to avoid it because they didn't want to tie up a bay for too long, especially when they could sell some flushes or alignments or a brake job or something that would be quick that they already had pricing and whatnot on. When it came to actual labor and small repair, they really didn't want to dive too much into it because accidents can happen. That ties up bays. And it's just not something that they do at a lube tire shop. So my involvement in side work never interfered with what it was I was doing for them. Now, there was one job that I had gotten, I think it was like a year and a half into my college. And I found a gal on the side of the road, broke down, hood up, that kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about. And I pulled up, threw my hazards on, ran across the street, asked her, what the problem was. She's like, oh, I don't know. My car's been overheating, etc., etc. I don't know if I'm out of coolant or whatever. You look underneath and it's just like soaked right on the ground, and she'd been driving like that for a little while. And I was like, okay, let me call a friend of mine. I can get a trailer out here. We can load your car up and take it back and take a look at the problem. So at that point in time, it seemed pretty evident, it seemed pretty evident that it was the water pump and it was coming from the timing cover area. You could see it was, constantly dripping and losing coolant. Little did I know that she'd been driving like that for a few days. I just thought this has just happened, so maybe we saved it. So we told her, hey, you need a water pump timing belt job because it's going to require us to take the timing belt off to put the water pump in. You might as well do both while you're there. And any shop's going to tell you the same exact thing. She's like, okay, yeah, cool. Should we have tested it for a blown head gasket? Yeah, we probably should have. I mean, we most definitely should have. But we didn't. We didn't think into that at that point in time. It was like, okay, it's leaking, it's whatever. We did a paper test in the back of the exhaust like we were taught, and it was like, oh, well, doesn't appear to be any kind of a head gasket issue. We'll just keep running with it. It might be, but we got to make sure that we can contain the leak first. So we go ahead and we replace it. We didn't charge very much. I think it was like, for the timing belt and water pump gasket kit, I think it was like $100. So we told her it'd be like, I don't know, $200 to do it. So we would make $100 on the back end. Nothing real expensive, probably cheaper than anybody else would have done it. I think the book called for like 2.5 hours to do, and we told her it would only be like a certain amount. So I think we would charge her like $50 an hour. It wasn't really much. So we go ahead and we start tackling it, and we're like, hey, we're gonna retest it too. So we get to that point, we get everything put back together, everything's holding pressure for the most part. We start it up and immediately starts overheating. We start bleeding it, we start trying to bleed it as much as we can, and it's not going really well. So we call her and we're like, hey, look, it looks like you might have a blown head gasket. Now, we didn't have the sniffer tester at that point in time. It hadn't come out yet. We told her, I said, looks like you're going to be looking at a blown head gasket. I don't know how long you drove on. She's like, oh, I've been doing it for a few days. Okay, that might have been helpful information to know. So whose fault was it at that point? Was it our fault for not asking, or was it her fault for not bringing it up? It doesn't matter. So we told her, well, look, we don't recommend you driving it home. Let's trailer it back to your house, and then when you're ready, we'll change the cylinder head gasket out. We'll have the head, machined. We'll have it checked, everything else. She didn't want to do all that. She wanted to drive it straight home, and we told her several times not to. She did make it home, luckily. Barely running, though, towards the end. Barely limped it into her parking spot. And she's like, oh, my God, I can't believe it. It seems like it runs worse now. I was like, we told you not to run it the way that it was. It was overheating. She tried the whole, turning the heater on thing. I'm like, you need a head gasket at this point. We need to do it. So let's get it set up. We'll give you the figure or whatever and let her know. She's like, no, I think I'm going to take it into a shop and have it done. Fine, whatever. We did what we could do for her. No big deal. 2 days later, she calls down to the community college because when I had found her, I was in my community college shirt. Now, this is the part that I'm just like, this is why I refrain from side work at this point in time. And I was trying to run a little side hustle business of mobile mechanic working. So she calls the school, tells the instructor, hey, these guys said they'd fix my car. I still have a belt inside this container, and they replaced my coolant with water. So the college instructor's like, what? So he brings us over. He starts talking to us. We give him the lowdown. Look, we explained it to her. We changed the water pump, timing belt, everything else. It's not leaking anymore, but she has to have a blown head gasket. We told her that, and we asked her not to drive it. She wanted to drive it anyways. We followed her home. She limped it in. We told her we would go ahead and take care of the head gasket for her. She didn't want to do it. She wanted to take it to another shop. All the coolant was in her car. If it's out of her car, we don't know what to tell you, but we gave her some water in case she needed a top off or something like that. And we gave her the old belt back because some customers like to have their old parts back. So he explains it to her and she goes, no, I'm looking at it. There is a belt in my box and I have water instead of my coolant. And he told her, he's like, where's the coolant? She's like, where's the coolant? He's like, the coolant is in your car. She's like, I'm looking in my car. I've got 2 jugs of water. He's like, no, it's physically in your car. It's in your car, it's in the radiator, and so is the timing belt. And the one that you have is used. And if you take it to anybody else, they're gonna tell you. And if you wanna come down here and bring me the stuff, I'll explain it to you again, and I'll even show you that the belt's used. She didn't wanna do all that, so she told us to fuck off and etc. So this was one of the things that I had to deal with when I was dealing with a customer who was of my own from doing mobile mechanic work. And so I'm telling you guys right now, there are customers that will go out of their way to turn around and pinpoint problems back on you to where you work or go to school at. So just because I wasn't wearing my Sears Auto Center uniform, I was wearing my college uniform, she knew where I was going to school, so that's who she made contact with. Had I been wearing my Sears Auto uniform, she probably would have tried to call my work too. So I guess if you're gonna do your side hustle, don't wear your work or school uniform out and about. Wear something different, completely unrelated. Don't mention where you work and whatever else, because it's just going to turn around and bite you in the ass. And if you're going to do it, try to be as proficient as you possibly can. Like I said, maybe it was our fault for not actually sniffing it out first before we even took on the water pump and timing belt job. Because in that scenario, we could have just said, hey, it's got a blown head gasket. This is how much. She might have said, well, then forget it. I don't even want to do the water pump and timing belt. In which case, she would have found out later down the road, she would have had to do the water pump and timing belt anyways, plus the cylinder head gasket job, and she could have figured it out on her own. But she was a little old gal collecting Social Security and gave me the boo-hoo story of how she didn't have enough money, and I really wanted to help her out. And this is the kind of stuff that affects you later down the road. So if you're thinking about owning your own business or you're thinking about doing your side hustle, you really need to know who it is that you're doing it for and how often that you want to do it, because it can come back to bite you in the ass, and they will call your employer if you tell them where you work and whatever else, And it could be bad for you. It could be bad for business. You could potentially lose your job as a result. Lucky for me, she only called the community college, and I had somebody to vouch for me. He was the lead instructor of the entire automotive program, and he knew me very well, and he knew my friend very well, who was also in the program with me, and he vouched for it. He's like, my guys wouldn't do that. That's not the way that I train them, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen their work ethic. I've seen the way that they work on cars. If there was something wrong with your car and he explained it to you, I'm going to take his word over yours. And that's the kind of backing that you need. But again, you don't want it coming back to your employer because you could potentially lose your job for a couple of reasons. Not just because somebody that you had done side work for is calling and complaining about you, but because now that might put a bad taste in their mouth, and they might go around and tell their friend of a friend of a friend of a friend that these kind of employees exist over here at this shop and they're terrible and this is what they did to me. And they'll make up some cockamamie story that sounds good to their friends, where their friends believe it and they start telling everybody else. And next thing you know, word of mouth travels and it gets back to your shop, and next thing you know, shop's got a bad rap. And if the shop has a bad rap because of something that you did as a side hustle, you just fucked yourself, you fucked over that shop, and now you could potentially be out of job. So I'm not trying to deter you from doing side work, because I know that side work can make you some cash, it can make you some nice Christmas money, or whatever it is that you're trying to do. Just be cognizant that these kind of people are out there. They are out there, they do exist, and it could ruin a lot of things for you. So be very, very careful of who it is that you do work for. If it's family and really, really close friends, maybe it's not a big deal. This is one of the main reasons why I don't do side work. I don't post ads on the internet for side work or anything like that. I'm not trying to have my shit ripped apart if something fucking goes wrong, because something will always go wrong. It can, there's always that possibility. So just be cognizant of that. As far as all the little wham bam, thank you ma'am kind of things, as far as friends and family go, and it's something that you don't really want to work on, hey, I've overcharged on certain shit that no shop would have ever charged on, and people have still gone with it. It's just one of those things. I don't know, maybe it's the personality or whatever, but I've actually told somebody when they're like, I really, 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 really want you to do this job specifically on my car, and I'm like, well then come down to my work and ask for me specifically and I'll do the job. I don't want to do all that. I don't want to pay whatever. I'm like, okay. And they're like, well, why can't you just do it in your driveway? I'm like, yeah, I can do that. Okay, cool. How much would you charge to do something like that? I'm like, you're looking at about $140 an hour. They're like, oh, wow, that's a lot. How many hours do you think it's going to be? It's going to be about 3 or 4 hours for me to do it. And it could be like a 1 hour job or 2 hour job. And they're like, oh, wow, really? And I'm like, yeah. So either one of two things happens. Either it deters them from asking me again, or they just cave and they're like, yeah, all right, cool, go ahead and bang it out. Next thing you know, you're committed to banging out that job and you're like, well, whatever, cash in pocket, I guess. But you overcharge the shit out of somebody if you really don't want to do the job. And I've had some guys call me on the side of the road and they're like, hey, I don't know what to do, yada, 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 the clutch isn't working. So I'll go out there with some DOT3 brake fluid, figuring it's some kind of leak or bleed or whatever. I go out there, there's no leak. So I'll top off their fluid reservoir, just happened to be empty. And we start bleeding the clutch, and everything's good again. I've had that happen too. So really quick, little tiny things. Ask me how much. I'm like, yeah, don't even worry about it. Just, if I need you to babysit one day, hit me up. So that was kind of a long video, but put your comments down in the comment section if you have run into situations like this trying to do side work. Are you for side work? Are you against side work? I'm sure everybody wants to know. I know it can be a positive, but it can also be a big negative. And I focused more on the negative this time when we decided to do this video than the positive. So we'll talk about the positives more later. I've kind of discussed a few of them, but to me, there's more negatives, more cons that outweigh the pros or the positives. So that's why I did this video. Thanks as always for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Deuces.